Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I got my co-host here, Clint McPherson. What's up, man? How you doing today?
Good, man. Awesome. Coming off a great weekend and ready to dive into another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. But with that said, we got a very special guest on the show today. She's the founder of a book publishing company and a digital marketing expert. If you're overwhelmed with the content copywriting for blogging, social media, or ads, she's going to offer some amazing advice, so stick around. Before I introduce our special guest today, I want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and to our mailing list or our website so you don't miss out on all the free resources we have to help you start and grow your business. With that said, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Dr. Morissa Schwartz, to the show. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very cool to have you on the show today. We're really excited, and we know our audience is going to get a lot out of the couple of main things you do, which is book publishing and also digital marketing. So pretty exciting.
And with that said, Morissa, can you take us back? And we asked this to all the guests we've had on the show to date. Can you take us back to when your entrepreneurial journey actually started and what it is about entrepreneurship that really gets you fired up and keeps you moving forward every day?
Yeah. So my parents have owned a mom and pop carpet shop since before I was born. And my first time visiting the shop, I was literally a week old. The story goes, my mother held, her flooring samples in one arm, me in the other, and was, showing people the flooring samples. And I was there right from the start. And, every day after school, I was at their store. They actually turned an office room in their store into like a little playroom for me. And then it eventually became like my homework den where I would, do my schoolwork and stuff. So I grew up in their small business and going to the different Chamber of Commerce events and community events. So I was there with all these small business owners from a young age. But it's funny because then, you go to school and the teachers don't talk about, one day you can be an entrepreneur. It's always one day you'll get a job. So in my head, I thought, well, I love this world my parents are in, but that's not going to be my world. I don't know, just everybody made it seem like such an impossibility. So I did grow up thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get a job. And it wasn't until I started like freelancing in high school. My mother found an article in a women's magazine and said, hey, why don't you try this? You can write. So I started freelancing, and that was honestly the only way that it came back to me like, oh, okay, you can turn this into a business. And I started working with small businesses like my parents, but it goes back to a young age of seeing them in their, natural business habitat. And me also, when I was 8, I started selling Mighty Beans on eBay. I used to sell jewelry at the street fairs and local events that my parents would sell their carpets at. So I guess there always was that little entrepreneurial thing, but it took a lot of seeds to make me actually realize, oh shoot, I can do that.
Yeah, like it's an actual possibility. And that's funny because you had parents who were entrepreneurial, who had their own business, but you're right. It's not, entrepreneurship maybe more now, but probably not at a young age, right? It's not talked about in school. So it's just not really talked about as an option. It's like, yeah, you get a job and that's it. And so it's interesting that you had that, kind of that same thought, that same mindset that most everybody else had, even though you had entrepreneurial parents. It's just really, really drilled into us from a young age. It's like, you go to school to get a job, you get a job and one day you retire and like, that's it, but there's so much more.
I want to strap you into that bubble, man, and just keep you there. So your creative side, I really think the education system to a degree is really it doesn't let you use your creativity to an extent. And I think a lot of times we get so confused and we're bottled into this, this methodology or whatever they're teaching you in school to where we're in a predefined box. They're grooming us for that corporate world to where it's like, okay, this is accepted. I need a job, a 9 to 5. Thank God it's Friday mentality, and as an entrepreneur, you're already thinking outside the box, right? How you can make things better, how you can do this better, how you can solve a problem. And I really think they really limit us to a degree in the education system. So I'm not saying the education system's terrible, because it can teach you good fundamental core things that, you know, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, you know, the multiplication, all the stuff that we all learn. But I mean, I know, like, again, if you grow up a certain way and you didn't have those entrepreneurial parents, right? And then even then, when you do, like you said, you had no idea, right? Like, you were going to school, but is that conversation even had between the entrepreneurial parents and the kids and saying, hey, look, this is what you can do one day, right? And maybe it is, and maybe it's not to some degree, but I think because the parents are trying to grind and just do their thing and make that money so they can put food on the table and pay those bills, right? Like, it might not be touched upon at a young age.
Yeah. And there's a business for everybody. There's an opportunity for everybody. Entrepreneurship, it comes in so many different shapes and forms. So, you know, you see it one way, you see it done one way by somebody, and you might not be super excited about that, but you might, you know, you can go and figure out what your entrepreneurial journey is, and, you know, figure out what you really want to do. So I think that's another thing that's cool about it. So Morissa, you started a publishing company called GenZ, and really, you know, interested in that. Looks like you're making a lot of headway, publishing a lot of books, and, you know, it looks really cool. So how do you guys do things differently than other publishing companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When you start a publishing company, there are a lot of publishing companies out there, but there's a right way of doing it, a wrong way. And the wrong way is like a vanity publisher, where basically you publish every book that comes to you. It's not self-publishing, but you're publishing almost every book that comes to you and just kind of not doing much work for it. And you're just literally like putting the book out there. And it, for lack of a better term, it's a scam in a lot of cases. I have a great friend who paid a company $5,000 to publish his book. And literally all they did was put it on KDP, which is something that takes maybe 2 minutes. Like they didn't do his book cover. They didn't edit the book. I read the book, and even he said to me, I thought they were going to edit this. There's a bunch of typos. Like, it was just so they literally didn't do anything. It was like
so
a scam.
lazy, yeah.
It's seriously. So that's the one thing where they kind of give publishers a bad name. So you have that, didn't want to be that. And then you have your traditional publishers where, you know, that comes with its own share of issues. So, you know, when you go like one of the big 5 New York publishers, unless you're like Stephen King or Kim Kardashian, like an A-lister, they're not giving you their full attention. You have to beg just to be heard, even if they are publishing your book. They're not going to do the marketing. It becomes the authors doing a lot of that. So I wanted to do an indie publishing company that's really a partnership. We're selective. At this point, we're only accepting about 5% of books queried to us because we have to be selective. Otherwise, you know, the quality goes down. We can only publish so many people. So we're an independent publisher where, you know, we collaborate with them. You know, some publishing companies are like, we need all the creative say, meaning the publisher, like, we want to make your book cover, we want to do this, we want to do that. We're more of a partnership. If we create a book cover for a client and they go, yeah, you know, I actually had this vision in mind, we are happy to tweak it and work with them on it. You know, and on the other end of the spectrum, unlike a traditional publisher, we're giving the author that attention that they deserve and not, you know, putting them to the bottom of a pile and saying, you know, talk to my assistant. So, yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. I was watching a video on your website that you did. I think you were at Barnes and Nobles, and you were kind of explaining the process. And it's really cool, the attention and, you know, the amount of effort that you put into the books that you publish, but also the ones that you don't. So you're providing, you know, constructive criticism for some, you know, people who submit their work, and you might go through with sticky notes and, you know, explain, kind of not edit it, you know, but give some pointers like, hey, if you can, you know, tweak this, and this, you know, it might be a better fit for you guys. And it might just work a little bit better. And you have such an extensive, like a background in writing and in publishing books that you and your team really know what you're looking for and what will do well. right? So it's really cool that you're providing that feedback to people like, hey, you're not quite there yet, but we're going to give you the time of day and explain that to you. I really love that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it because I went through this when I wanted to publish my first book. I sent out all these query letters to publishers, and I didn't hear back from like 95% of them. And it was such an icky feeling. And that's common. Like right now, we pitch our books out to different websites, like popular websites and stuff. And it's so common practice, even with them, that they just ghost you. They don't respond at all. So you don't know if they got it, if they didn't get it, if they loved it, nothing. So yeah, that's what we always like people to know. Yes, we got it. We read it. Here's what we think.
That's a huge differentiator. Cool. And I mean, that right there in itself goes a long way, because the customer experience, even though if I submit a book to you or whatever for you to do your thing, and then it comes back that, it's not selected, but this is what maybe you need to look at and work on and focus your attention to. I mean, that's huge, because now it gives me some feedback. Like you said, when you're reaching out to people and they don't give you, or reaching out to these publishing companies, they don't give you the time of the day. You don't know where you stand. You don't know if they're thinking about selecting your book or to publish it. And you're just like, okay, I have all these submissions, but not hearing back from a soul. I mean, that could get discouraging to a lot of people, and take their demeanor down. And then it's like, we want to stay motivated. And so like, that right there, like I said, that's a kudos to you. And I really appreciate that. Like, that's the approach, because that's your unique selling point. If it just to say that in itself. Love it. So digital marketing and copywriting, right? How can people become more effective communicators and copywriters to grow their audiences?
The biggest thing is knowing your audience and appealing to their emotions. Whenever I'm writing, anything that I've written has always, I've always had an audience in mind. Whether the audience is myself, somebody I know, somebody I've imagined, you need somebody to write to. Otherwise, the voice is all over the place. And then once you know who you're writing to, you need to feel their emotions to help them feel your emotions so that they can relate. And it works like that with copy. Like we just wrote an ad for ourselves. We do a ghostwriting service for people where we'll write books. And we've recently had a lot of clients coming in who are older people, and they're writing the books for their families to leave a legacy. So we wrote an ad appealing to them. Like, what would they want to know? If I previously, had I not worked with those people and learned about them, I would have just written an ad like, hey, become an authority in your field. Let's ghostwrite a book. But now I'm able to say, we worked with Dr. Smith and wrote this book, and now his children have, a piece of his legacy. Like, it's appealing to the emotions, it's letting them in. So definitely knowing your audience, appealing to their emotions.
Yeah, and kind of segmenting out the different, because you're going to be able to ghostwrite for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. So you can segment that larger market. Like, like it sounds like you're doing, you're identifying one segment of that market as being, maybe older people who've got a lot to share and they want to leave a legacy, and they're not necessarily doing it for their business. They're not necessarily doing it for money, as like, some people would be. They'd be like, okay, this would be part of my business. This will help me promote my business, or this will help me generate some extra revenue. And some people just, that's not the priority, necessarily. So they just want to publish something. They've had this idea, and the money, if they make $1 on it, great. If not, whatever, and they just want to leave that legacy. So that's really cool. I mean, it's really is important to understand your market. And I think a lot of people miss that in business in general. They're just shouting, they have this product, they're telling people about it, and they're not connecting. They're not understanding exactly why the customer wants it, and not connecting on that emotional level, and not really taking the time to understand them. So I think that's so important.
So Morissa, like ghostwriting to an extent, I mean, how extensive, can you explain the process to that? Like, how do you, so if a client reaches out to you, interested in that service, how much information do you need to be able to gather from them to really, make the book stand out or really resonate with them? Do you sit down with them? Do you pick their brain? How does that typically go?
Yeah, I mean, there are two different methods depending on the client. So the first is, the client essentially says to us, hey, I have this idea for a book. So we recently had a psychologist come to us. She says, I want to write a book telling people about how to live happier, healthy lives. And these are the points I want to cover. And she gives us an outline of like 10 pages of just all these different things. She gives us, different things that she would like some quotes, things that she would typically say to a client. And then we do the research to fill that in. We interview some of the clients stuff that she talked about, and we write the book from there. That's somebody who's very active in the drafting or the outlining stages. She kind of gave us all the ideas. We do the research to fill all that in. It's almost like we write a lot of blog articles. It's like writing a bunch of very long blog articles and putting them in a book when you do it like that, without the SEO. The other method that's probably way more popular, because I would say 75% of the books that we've ghostwritten have been memoirs. So it's essentially somebody coming to us and saying, hey, here's my life story. And we spend 1 to 2 hours with them every week, interviewing them, finding out all that information, asking them for as many details as possible. I mean, we're writing this one book about this fashion designer in California. And we asked her to describe, like one of the very first exercises we did with her was we asked her to describe her childhood home. And in that, we got so many details. She told us about the portraits on the wall. Well, who's in that portrait? Oh, that's my brother. Tell me more about your brother. We get all of this information, and we're like absorbing her memories and putting them into the book, and then weaving that into a cohesive story. So, yeah,
that's very cool.
It's an awesome process for sure.
Love that.
I mean, and then go back to publishing. Everybody today, to an extent, most entrepreneurs now, try to become, if not try to become an author through self-publishing, right? And you see that a lot. Everybody wants to claim because they want to get on Amazon or Kindle or whatever it is, and want to be able to taunt their expertise to an extent, and there's no fault to that. But how important is it, right? Because I believe if you're a self-publisher, you might skip a few steps. You might not have somebody like go through it and like really pick it apart. Because I really think it's important for somebody to read it, somebody to help you understand like what flow and what you're doing properly, what you're not doing properly. Because if I went to self-publish a book, it would probably be a disaster, right? Like if I go in and just write it, it might not even have a correct flow to it, because I'm not, I've written, I've done things in the past, but when it comes to it, I've been somebody that actually has written a chapter in a book. But when it comes down to it, it's like, I don't even know how that process would go. So how important and how different is like GenZ Publishing when it comes, because I'm sure you approach it and attack it probably from all angles, right? Angles that me as somebody that wanted to publish a book probably would just be like, okay, I went and
just start
watched
writing
a YouTube video, or I Googled it, and these are the how-tos to become an author. And I'm like, okay, so how would you approach that? Or what would you say to somebody like me thinking about publishing a book?
Yeah. So I was there when I self-published my first book. I was 17, didn't know what I was doing, but I just assumed very naively, oh, I wrote a book. People are just going to know about it. They're just going to miraculously, magically read about it. I didn't know what marketing was. I didn't know what marketing plan was back then. So I just put the book on what is now KDP. It used to be CreateSpace. I put it on CreateSpace and sold like 5 copies online, and a few of my friends and family, but that was it. And I'm like, shoot, okay, what happened? Why didn't anybody read it? And then I learned, there's a thing called marketing. So to somebody who's thinking about self-publishing, I say go for it. Just have a good marketing plan, create social media devoted to your book, run some ads. And the biggest thing is when you upload it to KDP or wherever you're self-publishing, but let's face it, it's probably going to be KDP because they're the best and they have kind of monopoly, is make sure that you put your book in the correct categories. You can select 2 categories with multiple subcategories for each. And if you do it strategically and intelligently, it will be easier to rank as a bestseller. So for example, I had a client or an author who wrote a poetry book, and most people, who didn't know how to classify, they would just put poetry under genre. but we put poetry, American poetry, Western poetry, and he was able to climb the charts and become, a top seller a lot more easily and quickly. Same thing with your keywords. You're allowed to put something like 5 to 7 keywords. Put keywords that are specific that people are actually going to search, So I worked with somebody and they're putting in the word memoir. I'm like, that's great, but you're competing against 50 million books. So let's be more specific. Young adult memoir, new age memoir, something, more specific like that. Those are probably the biggest things in self-publishing to know. And PR as well. Do shows, do articles, guest post articles about your topic.
Yeah. And do you coordinate those PR tours for people, or how does that work?
Yeah. So for our selected authors, we do. So it's like two sides of the business. So GenZ Publishing, that's the independent publisher where, yes, we are partners with them. We're helping them with all that. That's where we're selecting like 5%. And by the way, that's why it's also an independent publisher where they don't pay us. It's a straight royalty. We split royalties. Boom.
I was going to say you're invested in them. Yeah,
exactly. The other side is Dr. Rissy's, that's where, we're helping the self-published authors and people who we've ghostwritten books for. A lot of the time after we've ghostwritten the book, we'll say, can you help me get this out there to the world too? So we help them market it, but we're publishing it on KDP for them. We're finding those categories and search terms and putting them in there for them. That with them, we have PR packages where they would work with us to promote their book that way.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of everything. The marketing part is everything. You can have an amazing book, an amazing product or whatever it is. And if you just throw it up there online, I did that with my first business. I thought it's a product, and I went to my manufacturer and I said, hey, listen, I'm about to launch my website here in the next couple of days. Do you have, if we need to really ramp up production, do you have the capability to do that? Like at least 10x what we're doing, like 1,000 units a week or something. And he was like, yeah, we could do that, but he kind of looked at me like, that'll never happen. Like we can do that, but that's never, good luck, man. And he didn't know too much. He didn't know too much about marketing or how e-commerce worked, but he knew enough that like, you're not just going to throw up a website and all of a sudden everybody's going to know about it. So I was kind of like you, where I just thought, well, throw it out there and the internet finds you, and people find you on the internet, and that's it, and then just blows up from there. So yeah, marketing and doing the research. Sounds like you do a lot of research through your entire process. And it sounds like you do a lot of good market research in addition to researching what you're going to write about. If you're ghost writing, that's a more specific thing. But yeah, you have to do that market research. It's so important. So that's cool. So Morissa, through your entrepreneurial journey from the highest to the lows, what has been the most difficult thing for you so far about being an entrepreneur?
My father told me when I first became an LLC, he said something is going to go wrong every single day. And I thought, yeah, right. What a terrible world would that be? And now I'm lucky if it's only one thing that goes wrong every single day. It's when you have so many moving pieces, you can, we do everything to make sure everything goes as smoothly and perfectly as possible. But there's always something, especially in this COVID world, where just, there's a shipping delay. There's always something. So I think coming to grips with that has been one of the biggest lessons to learn. I grew up with type A personality, and being a type A, you can't always be type A. You have to realize, okay, nothing is perfect. Just go with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely understand that. And in the days that are really going very, really smoothly and everything's working out, you're kind of like, ooh, when's this streak going to end? Sometime today, sometime tomorrow. But yeah, there are so many fires to put out, being an entrepreneur, and, but it's cool. It's kind of interesting. You learn, you get better, you get a little bit, I think you just get tougher every little thing that you go through. You're like, at first you lose sleep for a while, and then, you start getting more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's a great point.
I think prioritizing, the fires that you have to put out is a big key. And when early on in the entrepreneurial journey, it's like, you don't know, right? Through experience, you learn, but you really don't know. You can say, okay, well, I think this one's bigger. I have no idea. And at some stage, and obviously some of them are basically, you know which one you need to put out first. But I've been in situations where I'm like, oh man, what do I do now? Okay, I'm gonna try this one and see if it works, and if it backfires, oops, I'm sorry. But I just think early on in your entrepreneurial journey, experience is one of those things. It's like, okay, learning how to prioritize and which one's more important. It's usually the project that you're currently working on, or the one that's due either next, or that you just completed, that for some reason something messed up along the way, and then you're trying to have to put that fire out. But yeah, I agree. So Morissa, as we wrap up this episode, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience? And not only that, could you leave our listeners with one piece of advice? If you could leave our listeners one piece of advice, what would that be?
Realize that there is no box. A lot of people say think outside the box. I like to go a step further and say there is no box.
Love
Just
it.
go for it. Be creative. Do your thing.
It's cool.
I love it. I think I would agree 100% with that, because when like, and I always use that terminology, is like they paint us in a box, and it's like we got to think outside the box. But in reality, I love what you just said, because as entrepreneurs, or just in general, if we learn how to break that mold and say, hey, there is no box. I mean, we create the world we live in through thoughts and the way we perceive things. So continue to move forward and say, hey, screw that box, and just move, like there's not one, like you just said. And I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode. And from the both of us, Morissa, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us and adding value to what we're doing on our podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's really been a pleasure, Morissa. Thank you all so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Morissa is working on, check out drrissywriting.com. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our podcast, and don't forget to download our free ebook about the success mindset at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, and don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.